Hello everyone, it's Dan. Welcome back. This is going to be a video that I kind of decided to make on a whim. I'm in the middle of a pretty big construction project, a video for which I'll be releasing probably in the next week or so. And I don't know, I had these handful of Perry Agincourt models that I wasn't quite sure what to do with. So I took a cue from my youngest daughter, who is really into this YouTube channel, not for the content, but I think she's more proud of me having this YouTube channel than she is of maybe any of my other life's accomplishments. But she had suggested that in addition to constantly asking how many subscribers I have, she had suggested some Halloween themed content. So I thought, let's make some ghosts. So that's what we're doing here. What I've done, I don't play any undead armies or anything like that. I might use these for role playing or something like that. But more than anything, it was just for the color experimentation. But what I've done here in the background, I've got them mounted on 40mm squares, and I would recommend that you undercoat white if you're going to follow along here. I had already undercoated them in black, so I had to do 2 coats of Corax white. If you do undercoat in white, you'll still do a base coat of Corax white. It's kind of like a off-gray color, off-white gray, and that provides a nice foundation for what we're doing now, which is a dry brush of pure white. I'm using Vallejo flat white. You could use White Scar if you've got that. You just want a nice flat white color, and you're going to dry brush the entire model. So everything's going to get this dry brush of white. And what we're kind of doing here, we're working up to a contrast paint layer. So this is kind of like slap chop, except that we're starting at a brighter hue than we would probably with a traditional slap chop method. And once you've dry brushed, you're going to go through and do what you've seen me do in other videos maybe, which is kind of this dot highlight of pure white. And you're just going to pick up the uppermost raised edges, like where you would place a traditional highlight with regular layer highlighting, but you're doing it just with white over everything. And this is probably more aggressive in terms of volume of placements and brush stroke size than I would have done with my normal pre-highlight dip method. There's not going to be any dipping here. Instead, we're going to jump right into this contrast paint. So this is Briar Maiden Chill from Games Workshop, and it's kind of like a pastel turquoise color. It's pretty cool, and I thought that it made a nice kind of ethereal look to these models. So you're going to coat everything in this contrast paint, and then much like with a regular wash, you're going to wick away whatever you don't need. This stuff, though, does dry pretty quickly if you've never dealt with it before. And what I recommend you get if you're going to be dabbling with a lot of contrast paint is the contrast medium that's good for thinning this stuff out, because it really doesn't behave normally with water like a shade would or a regular acrylic paint would. You really need some of that contrast medium if you're going to be dealing with this stuff a lot. But again, as you can see, I'm coating the whole model. I'm kind of wicking away anything that I don't want. You want to be really careful of pooling because, as I said, this stuff starts to dry pretty quickly. And even if it doesn't fully dry, if you leave it there for too long, it'll start to pigment the color underneath. And yeah, you could experiment you could use a bone color for the base layer here instead of white. That's the cool thing about contrast paint, is it looks a little bit different over different undercoats. You go with a darker undercoat or a warmer or a cooler shade, it's going to tend to have a different end result once the contrast paint on top dries. But again, that's all we're doing here. And while they're drying, I don't typically do base work kind of mid-process on a model, but I had a minute and I was waiting for the contrast paint to dry, and I realized that the normal weathering that I do, like caking on dirt and mud onto feet and legs, that I typically do while I'm basing the model, that's why I do it at the end, wouldn't make any sense here because they're ghosts. So I thought, let me just go in with this is Territorial Beige from Walmart Apple Barrel Paints. And I use all Apple Barrel paints for all of my basing work just because it's cheap. It's like 50, maybe 75 cents now for a bottle of paint that will last quite a while. So, and here they are dried. And you could, in theory, be done here, base the models if you want, but I've got a couple more things I'd like to do to them just to make them pop a little bit more. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that same white color and I'm going to do a very light dry brush over the finished dried contrast paint here, just to help them pop a tiny bit more. And again, you're going to coat, I wouldn't say the whole model in this case, it's mostly just the upper areas, raised edges, and this is a lighter dry brush than the very first one we did, which I would describe more like an overbrush, a lot more aggressive. This is more like a dusting. And then what I'm going to do is paint some eyes here. I want some kind of like glowing red eyes. So what I've taken there is some Carroburg Crimson shade, and just going to kind of dot around the eyes there. We're trying to create like darkness around the recesses of the eyes so that I can then paint a bright color in for the eyes and the pupils. But because it's already so bright on the face, we want to darken it down. This creates kind of like an ambient red glowing effect. This AK Acrylics Blood Red has been my go-to like flat red color. And so I'm going to paint these in. Think about it like almost like you're painting a regular eye with the whites of the eyes and then ultimately a black pupil, but instead we're doing the red of the eyes in this case, and then we're going to do a dot of white instead of black for a pupil. That's what I'm doing there, getting that white paint out, playing heavy duty in this tutorial here, but we're going to just like a little dot of white there toward the upper center of the eye, which creates, I think, kind of a creepy look. So you've got kind of the ambient glowing red, the bright red, and then the dotted white. And there's, I think, an argument that this doesn't make any sense, but we're dealing with ghosts here, but I thought that needed the pop of color, so I wanted to make some like rusted weapons, but make it almost look like the ghostly part of the weapon was becoming a real weapon. So I took some Iron Breaker Silver, slightly lighter silver color than I typically use for the base application, and I'm painting the ends of the weapons and kind of like thinning out the paint as I go down, in this case the like halberd shaft, to make it almost look like it's blending in from ghost substance to actual, corporeal substance, maybe toward like the end of the blade. And I might even do like a separate tutorial on rust. I don't like riser rust. I have it. You can see it there. It doesn't behave right. Like if you dry brush rust over a sword, it's going to pick up on all the raised edges. But rust, like verdigris, really does get down into the recesses of things. So I actually just take like a regular orange acrylic paint and then water it down. You can see kind of over on the left. It's almost like a 50-50. And then I create my own like orange wash. And it's a shame because Games Workshop also has the verdigris like corrosion technical paint that's fantastic. Something oxide, I think is what it's called. And I feel like the rust effect should have been pretty much the same kind of concept, just in orange. But anyway, I blend up my own and wash it. And you can see it goes on very bright, but it'll end up drying a much more subdued orange color. And yeah, then I'm going to take this shining silver, very bright color, silver color from Army Painter. And then once that orange is dried, I'm going to do just some highlights on the uppermost edges of the weapons to make them pop a little bit more. Again, not painting the whole axe head there. I'm just doing like dots on where I feel like light would be getting picked up. And because we have a minute here, I thought I'd show you some of the basing here. This is following mostly my standard basing protocol. I've got a separate video on that. But I wanted to create a slightly more atmospheric basing with these guys. So I'm going with basically all my basing supplies that don't have bright colors associated with them. So I'm using like a more dead grass rather than the Army Painter like battlefield grass, which is a bright, vibrant green. Got rid of all my flowers. So just lots of like dead plants and tufts and stuff like that is what I'm going with. And then once I've got them all applied, I use super glue for a lot of it just because it dries fast. Once I've got all my tufts applied, I end up doing a dry brush of pure white over everything, which is interesting. It's something I started doing way back in the day when I played Khador for War Machine. That's what you can see me doing there. But I did like a heavy dry brush of white to create like a frosted look on the ground. But I realized if you pull it back a little bit, something cool that happens when you dry brush white is that it does make everything kind of stand out, right? It creates a little bit more contrast, but it also blends the colors together a little bit. So you can have like really diverse looking foliage on the ground, but it sort of just ties it all together. And then this, I don't know, I was kind of on a whim. I decided to do this, but there were a couple spots where the ground had sort of that bluish hue to it from the contrast paint, and I liked it. It almost looked like a ectoplasm or something. So I went back in at the end here and added some more behind the models to make it look like they were leaving this, I don't know, ghostly goo in their wake as they were, wandering through. So anyway, I thought it had a kind of cool effect to it. And then what we'll do after this dries is paint the edge of the base. I use, in this case, I think it was dryad bark, but any kind of dark brown color is pretty much what I go to. And here we go. Finished models. I think they look pretty cool. And I think if you use actual ghost models instead of out-of-the-box Perry Agincourt figures, they would look even cooler. I got quite a bit coming up here. I've alluded to a kind of secret project I'm working on that I'll have a video for here in the next week or so, and I've got 4 more reviews and then lots of painting content to follow that. So as ever, appreciate you dropping by, and until next time, happy gaming.